Good deal here. Looks like it's a little bit after 9:30, so we're good to go. Thank you all for being here this morning. It's been a while since I have been able to do one of our firm's webinars, and I think it's been several months. I appreciate my partners who've stepped in and helped me while I was getting ready for a couple trials. I had a trucking case that we got settled. It was in federal court. We had a brain injured plaintiff who was really badly injured. She had an 18-wheeler that fell asleep at the wheel, drifted off the road and hit her. Really sounds like it should have been an easy case, but we fought that case for years. And there's a story to tell in and of itself of how motions in limine really impacted that case, how the pleadings impacted that case. I'll say the defense did. They had a master plan for defending that case, but at the end of the day, we were able to kind of get around it with some really good rulings from the court. And we'll talk about that another time. We had a product liability case that was resolved. It was a fire case. A vehicle got rear-ended, burst into flames, and caught on fire. And a young lady was burned to death. Those cases were both set for trial, which is the key to getting a case settled, especially a difficult, high-value case. Had I not had good trial settings in those, I wouldn't be able to be reporting back to you that we were able to get those wrapped up and had great results for our clients that had lost so much. Just a reminder that this CLE or this webinar you'll get CLE credit. Our firm is covering the cost of that for you, and so thank you for being on here today. Also, we will report that to the Georgia Bar on your behalf within the next 2 weeks. Also, I've got a slideshow that we'll be showing today, a PowerPoint with several links in it. We will send you that out also within the next week or so, so that you'll have a copy of this presentation for your own use. I'm happy to provide that for you, and you'll see that there are throughout this presentation going to be numerous references to these industry documents that we're here to talk about today. And so you'll be able to see the titles. I've made a special effort to put the cover of the various documents on the PowerPoint, so you'll have those names available. You can purchase those books. Some of them are available free online, so just search. Some of the documents are put out by the federal government, which is helpful not only for use in the case, but for getting them. And then others you got to purchase. And I don't think anything is overly expensive. I've got copies of all these, and if you need anything out of them, I'm happy to share it. So finally, remember that I love questions. It makes it more interesting and helpful to you. If you've got a question, please use the chat feature, and we'll answer them as we go. I'll try to keep my eye on the chat feature to see what we've got here as far as questions. And finally, just want to let you know how passionate I am about trucking cases. I began my career, as some of you who've been attending these webinars for a while know, I began my career 20 years ago this year, and started off doing auto products liability litigation. And I just started getting trucking cases, and I don't know why. They just started showing up on my caseload, and I was thankful for them. But I realized that my only experience I ever had working cases was working these extremely difficult auto product cases. And I really only knew one way to work cases, and that was overkill. I mean, you had to fight to win. And so I began working the trucking cases the same way that I'd always worked my auto product cases. Didn't treat them at all like a car wreck case. You can't. I'm sure you've heard that before. But to get maximum value, you can't. And especially these days when trucking companies and their counsel are so sophisticated, they're well prepared to defend these cases. And if you're just going to handle it like a car wreck case, do the bare minimum, you're really not going to get maximum value in the case, and you could be doing a disservice to your client. So the part, I guess the whole purpose of today is show you some of the things that I do to really take it to the next level. And that regard. This is not everything that I do, but one of the things I do is use these industry materials in this case. I've also got a book that I wrote probably maybe 2015, 14, something like that, on trucking litigation that I gave out for free. I don't know if I've got any more copies of those left, but if anybody wants one, I'll look around and see if we've got a copy. It's a short read and helpful. There's some things about it that are outdated though, and some of the hours of service regulations have changed since then. And so you just have to take it with a grain of salt. I haven't updated that book, and maybe I should. That should be a good project for me. So anyway, here we go. Let's look at this presentation. I'll share my screen with you. There you go. So using industry documents to prove your commercial vehicle case. That's the goal today. And so I really want to do this by marching you through specific cases and how I use those materials. And I try to include a wide variety of those so that you can see, what we used in the various cases that we had. All right, so here we go. Hopefully you can see this. If you can't, somebody send me a chat message if you can not see the presentation, and I'll work on that on my end. But this was a case where the trucking company, truck driver was going down the interstate. My clients were two wonderful people. That he was a missionary. They were headed to a missions conference where he was going to be the speaker, and had his whole family in the car. His wife, he was driving, and his daughter was in the back seat. And this 18-wheeler, as you can see there in the damage to the vehicle in the fuel tank area, just came over on their vehicle and clipped them. He lost control and lost his life. They were both injured. And so that's how we began the case. It's a lane change case. And so what I wanted to do was I got ready to prepare to take both the truck driver's deposition, the employees of the trucking company that ran things such as the safety director and the corporate representative they put up. I wanted to be ready for their depositions. And so what I do is I collect all the industry materials that I can find on that topic. This was a lane change case. And what I want to, exactly what I want to do is I want to have, it's not me saying what you did is wrong. It's more than just the rules of the road of the state where the wreck happened at saying that what you did is wrong. There's our industry materials specific to the trucking industry that really raises the standard of care. Now there is the same standard of care, a reasonable person, but it's the standard of care of a reasonable person who is a truck driver. And in that regard, there's a lot more materials out there for truck drivers than there are for the individual driver. And this is one example. This is called the Commercial Vehicle Preventable Accident Manual. It's put out by the United States Department of Transportation, Federal Highway Administration Motor Carriers Unit. That is the industry kind of watchdog by the government for the trucking industry. And they put out a book just on this topic, and it has almost every type of accident scenario. And within it, it's got really what the driver should be doing, what the maintenance department should be doing, and what management should be doing to prevent these type crashes. And so it gives you really a standard of care to use it. If the truck driver did not do these things, then there's an industry standard you have to prove your case. If the maintenance department didn't do what they're supposed to do, if the management of the trucking company didn't do what they're supposed to do in that regard, it is really an authoritative way to prove your case. For instance, management here says, have you trained your drivers regarding safe usage for lane changes, and what standard and what performance? If they haven't done that, if they have no standard, if they have no training that they can give you on lane changes, then they violated that. And I don't know how many times I've had a trucking company who haven't addressed that specific topic. It is something that they do it every day. Trucks change lanes. And so that's one example. This is the next manual I want to talk to you about. You've probably all heard of this one. I hope you have. It's the Commercial Driver's License Manual. It's a manual put out by every state in our country, it's a uniform book, but it's each state have adopted it and put it out. And you have to have this book. I mean, this is the bare minimum you need in every case. You need to go pull the manual for the state where your defendant driver was licensed, where he took his test, and you can get it into evidence pretty easy. I've never had a truck driver deny that was what he studied to become a commercial truck driver. To go take the license test, the written portion of the test, this is the manual that they all give them. So go learn that, go read this, learn this, and then take the test. And they will also admit this is the minimum information a truck driver needs to know to be safe on the roads. I really never had a truck driver argue with me about that issue. And if they did, it's put out by the state. I mean, what are they going to say? So they kind of have to. But it's got, for instance, a section on lane changes. And you can see here how the manual addresses the various lane change situations that could come up, what drivers are supposed to do in that scenario. Again, you use these type industry standards to attack the driver. Many times you can kind of, there's two things. Your number one goal as a litigator on these cases is to make it about the trucking company, right? So here are things that the truck drivers should know. Is the trucking company training their drivers consistent with what this manual says they should be training them? They should be able to do, and so that gets you back to the trucking company. But also, you can get the trucking company many times to admit this is the standard of care for the driver. This is what the driver should have done, and that doing these things will prevent crashes. And so this is a great resource. Every lawyer handling a truck wreck case should start with the CDL manual and continue through these other manuals I'm telling you about, and see what the manual says about the various topics that you have relevant in your case. Industry materials. So remember, I said, one of the things a trucking company should do in addressing a lane change situation is training. But that came from the federal government book I showed you, the very first manual that I had. It said, are you training your people? The next thing is the CDL manual, which has what drivers should be doing. And then you've got their internal documents that you can get through litigation, through request for production. In this case, this company used a group called the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance to obtain their safety materials. And they used materials that they had purchased from an external source. And it has a section on lane changes, make only safe and necessary lane changes. And talks about how you should limit your lane changes. And so it's addressing the standard of care. It shows the jury that there's more to this than the simple driving, but like they do going down the road. There is no manual that I have that talks about when I should and shouldn't change lanes. There are some driver's manuals, but they're nowhere near the detail that you have here. And so this is a big one. Left-hand turn cases. Left-hand turn cases are a problem for trucking cases, or for trucking companies and truck drivers. They're great trucking cases many times. And let me tell you why. It takes you so much longer to make a left-hand turn than it does a right-hand turn. And you cover the opposing lane of travel. You are blocking traffic while you're doing it. And there's a portion of time when you're blinded by what's coming your direction while you're making that turn. You can see here in this diagram, left-hand turn cases, that the car hit the side of the truck. You can see that the driver of the truck wouldn't be able to see that car at the time of impact. Neither one of his rear view mirrors would have caught the oncoming vehicle. He was in my client's lane of travel. My client had to come to a stop and wasn't able to get stopped in time, and underrode the truck, and unfortunately he was seriously injured, brain injury. And so again, where do you start? You go to your CDL manual. Now this is one of the better sections, 2.7.7. I've used this so many times in litigation, not only for left-hand turn cases, but anytime that a truck driver is trying to cross traffic. A truck driver could be going across traffic to the median. He could be doing a U-turn. He could be doing a left-hand turn. In all those occasions, also, if I've had a case where a truck driver was backing on the roadway, that case is pending right now. And this is applicable to all those situations, because it's anytime you're trying to cross or enter traffic. This is the standard of care for a truck driver. And look at the last sentence. It says, before you start across a road, make sure you can get all the way across before traffic reaches you. Well, if you have a wreck, guess what? Traffic reached you. So you violated that standard. You know, when you're cross-examining the truck driver and the trucking company, I mean, sir, you were crossing traffic. I was. Traffic reached you. Yes, it did. I mean, it was a wreck. And so you got them right there. That's a great section to use in those situations. That's the standard of care. Again, here's another book. This is one you do have to purchase. It's put out by the National Safety Council. National Safety Council is a group of individuals from various industries that publish safety materials for use. And the whole purpose of it was for the trucking company to take these materials and use them to run their trucking companies safely. And so this is another industry material. You can say, did you use it? Did you use these materials or anything like them? And use them. You can both cross-examine their people, use them through your experts. But you know, look at this one. This has got to do with left-hand turn cases, and you know, it talks about all the things that a truck driver should do before making a left-hand turn. And so you could use these as questions to ask the truck driver. If they didn't do these things, they would be in violation of this industry standard of care. Preventability determinations are big. And so that's always a fight, because they say, hey, the preventability determination is different standard of care. That's our opportunity after the wreck to make things right. So it's a subsequent remedial measure. Those are the type of arguments they make to try to keep this out of evidence. But you need to lay the foundation ahead of time to get it into evidence. Look for whether the company did preventability analysis. Do they have any documents as to why they do them? And if not, you need to question them. Do you do them, and why you do them? And this company had a document in their file that the truck driver had signed as part of his employee agreement, saying, look, I understand if I'm in a wreck, you're going to do a preventability analysis. And they gave me a great statement talking about how doing so reduces crashes. So if their company is not doing it, even though they've got it in their documents, and this company did not do one, even though they had this in their documents, and then you can say they've got some management controls they're violating. They're not supervising their drivers in the correct way. And therefore it's a direct cause of action against the trucking company, which we had here. Where then once you just establish that they should have done one, well, what are the different preventability standards? Where do you go to find whether they violated it? How should the company have done their preventability analysis? And so there's a great guide out there, a Motor Carrier's Guide to Improving Highway Safety, put out by the United States Department of Transportation. It's a free online source that you can find on the DOT's website. And here it's the federal government offering trucking companies a free resource in order to determine whether they're going to do preventability analysis. It encourages them to do so, and if so, how. Here, you know, it talks about why do we do them. Motor Carrier Guide says, you know, that they improve your accident rates. They have a significant, doing so significantly reduces your accident rates. And so this is another argument as to why a trucking company should do preventability analysis. I'm in a case right now that's I've been in a huge fight over the preventability analysis. When they came up with one argument as to how the truck wreck occurred. They were deposed on it. Their truck driver stuck to his guns on that. They felt strongly that they were going to keep me from getting their preventability analysis that they did do in discovery. And so they felt free to have their trucking driver testify that the wreck happened a certain way. Well, the problem is I got a court order that they had to produce it. And once I got it, I learned that the trucking company had already determined that the truck driver didn't do it the way he said he did, and that he was at fault. And the truck driver had taken the position that he wasn't at fault and that it happened a different way. Well, that was great for me. Why? Well, it created a conflict between the truck driver and the trucking company. The trucking company could no longer stay on the same page with the driver, because he was cemented saying it happened one way while their preventability analysis said it happened a different way. So this was that was a real success for that case. For this type of accident, it has specific action points that you should look at. It's preventable if. And so you look at the different accident scenarios. For instance, accidents and intersections, preventable if, the driver pulled out from a side street in the face of oncoming traffic. Well, if you go back to that accident diagram I showed you, that's exactly what he did. He pulled out from a side street in the face of oncoming traffic. Look at this one, accidents while entering traffic stream. Well, that truck driver was entering my client's traffic stream. And look at the highlighted middle portion there. Driver attempted to pull out in a manner that forced other vehicles to change their speed or direction. So perfect example there. My client definitely had to change his speed because he hit the side of the truck. He came to a complete stop. So all this established that the wreck was preventable and standard of care there, and that the trucking company, had they done their job, had they done this in the past, they would have lowered their accident rates. They had other wrecks where they had truck drivers pull out in a similar manner, and they did nothing about it. Matter of fact, their facility required them to take left-hand turns leaving the trucking plant, where the storage facility where they kept the trucks, the terminal. And when they would leave the terminal, they would frequently cause traffic problems there. Had a few wrecks. Again, back to the preventable accident manual put out by the US DOT. You can see again this specific right-of-way situation is addressed. And then driving tips: do not force other drivers to brake or steer because you obstructed maneuver into their path. So you can see there, these manuals address the various situations that are coming up in your cases. These are things that we need to be using, and it makes your depositions go so much better. When you're using these materials, where are they going to go? They're either going to disagree with the federal government and look bad, or they're going to agree with them and look bad. Either way, they're going to look bad. This is another document. It's put out by the Society of Automotive Engineers. The Society of Automotive Engineers is a group of really smart folks that write papers for peer review on issues related to, cars and traffic and anything that happens on the roadway and automobiles, but they do cover a lot of its situations regarding crashes. One of the things, there's an SAE article that's a peer-reviewed document that discusses how long it takes trucks to turn. Well, why is that important? What do they always say in these cases? Every single time they're going to claim your client was speeding. They were so far away when I began my turn that there's no way they could have reached me if they hadn't been speeding. And then they weren't paying attention and ran into the side of the truck that was clearly in their path. Well, it's just math. If you know how long it took them to make that turn, if you know that the whole turn took X many seconds, what's the one question you got to ask the truck driver? Where was he when you first saw him? Oh, and what is he going to say? Oh, he was, miles away. They were back at that turn so far away. If he hadn't been speeding, he'd have never got to me. I had plenty of room to pull out. Well, if you know how long his turn took and where the driver was, your client was at the time that the pull out into the traffic began, it's just math. And you can determine how fast your driver would have had to been going. I've had a case one time, we'll look at it later, where I was able to show that my client would have had to have been going 167 miles an hour in order to reach the truck. Well, that was impossible. It was like a Ford Focus or something, and it couldn't go 167 miles an hour. And so the truck driver had lied that my car was clearly much closer when the truck began its turn. And this industry material really helped establish that fact. Again, using internal documents are important. There's a lot of these documents out there. You can use them, not only the ones that you get from request for production in your case, but start collecting them from other cases. Start collecting them from other carriers. This is what other trucking companies are saying to their drivers. Why are you not saying it to your drivers? Why don't you have materials like this? Why have you not published materials like this? This is a big company, CR England, one of the bigger trucking companies in the country, and they've got a training session just on left turns. So if your company doesn't have training on left turns, then that gets as a negligent training case. You haven't trained your drivers. And it talks about what truck drivers should do in that situation to avoid crashes. This is another frequent type crash that we see. A lot of times these cases are concerning because you'll have a truck parked on the side of the road. Your client will drift off the roadway and hit them. And what do they say? You weren't paying attention. You fell asleep. Your client wasn't on the roadway. Those are tough cases, right? Your client is not completely fault free because they're off the road when the wreck happens. But how do you establish liability against a trucking company in those situations? Well, you use industry materials. First off, there are standards they've got to comply with, put out by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. The FMCSRs, the regulations governing truck drivers, say that they have to have their flashers on, they have to put out their triangles, correct distances within the first 10 minutes. But there's a higher standard of care than just that minimum Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulation. And that is that many trucking companies and many industry materials say you should never park on the side of the road ever. This is the Tower Group is a group of insurance companies. It's an insurance, and they tell their companies that they insure, don't let your drivers park on the side of the road at all, unless it's a true emergency situation. There are various trucking companies that have the same expectation of their drivers. U.S. Express, CRST, Werner, one of the biggest. Matter of fact, Werner, in their driver pledge that every driver must sign, you can see there about halfway down on that page, I will never stop or park, on the road or shoulder unless I have a breakdown or a real emergency. And so it's never, you are a target if you're on the side of the road. And Robert Heath, that's another trucking company, Knight, calls their drivers sitting ducks if they park on the side of the road. Robert Heath says no one is to park on the shoulder except in the event of emergency. This one is similar to something I found on the side, and I went to depose a trucking company, and they wanted to have the deposition at their terminal where their manager worked. He was going to be the corporate representative. And I asked at a break, I said, can I go to the restroom? And they said, yeah. And so coincidentally, the break room was also where the restroom was located. And so they sent me down to their break room. Well, in discovery, I had asked for any kind of safety materials that you have, training materials, including any posters hanging up, and they didn't give me anything. Well, I go into their break room and I see they've got posters hanging up all over the room, including one that was directly applicable to the case. I took a picture of it on my phone and went back to the deposition, asked them questions about it and why they hadn't produced it. But here is the American Trucking Association that has a flyer that you can hang up in your trucking company to remind your drivers that they are targets on shoulders of the roadway and to never park there. Again, this is the course 101A by the SALT Institute is on the right-hand side of that page is a study course for truck drivers. training materials there. So, and it says in bullet point 3, never ever park, on the side of the road. And so if they parked on the side of the road, they're clearly bucking what many companies say and many industry materials say they shouldn't do. This is a U-turn case, and U-turn cases are always good cases for the plaintiff. U-turns should never happen in a truck. They take forever. These trucks are too big. They take up too much of the roadway. They can't see as well throughout much of the turn. They're impeding traffic for gigantic periods of time. There is just never a good excuse to do a U-turn in an 18-wheeler. They should go down, find an overpass, turn around, come back. They've got to do something different. But here, this case started out with a U-turn. U-turns are prohibited by most every trucking company. They're almost always determined to be the wrong thing. And for instance, Aero Trucking Company says here, any U-turn or even an attempted U-turn will result in you being terminated. They're just prohibited. They're bad ideas by trucking companies. 3 more industry materials by CR England, Billy Barnes, CRST, talking about the fact that U-turns should never be attempted. And if they do so, they're always preventable. This is a different preventability manual that we've looked at already. This one's again put out by the National Safety Council, the Guide to Determine Motor Vehicle Collision Preventability. And it says a U-turn that results in a collision is a preventable collision, period. There's no argument about it. There's no, well, if this happened or if that happened, or what if the car that hit me was doing this or that. No, it's preventable, period. And so you've got that argument going for you in your cases. And this is a good manual. This is one you also have to purchase online. You can find it. This was a tough case. It started off with frankly, I took this case because my brother-in-law is the lawyer who sent it to me, and I wanted to help him. And so, but my client was disabled on a completely dark road with the power dead in their vehicle, no lights on. And the truck driver comes up at night, late at night, and hits my client in the roadway while they're trying to figure out why their car was broken down and still in the car. But I got very fortunate in discovery in that case. They had training materials, and gosh, I mean, must have been living right when I was handling this case. But look, I mean, aim high and steering, and it used as an example a truck at night coming up on a disabled vehicle with its lights off. And says, you've got to be looking down the road 15 seconds for these situations. And so that was really big in helping getting that case resolved. This is a case I handled where a truck was heading into oncoming traffic. My client was just driving down the road. She had just started a brand new job. Matter of fact, I wrote about this case recently for any of you that may be GTLA members. It was in How I Achieve Justice, I believe is the name of the article in the most recent GTLA magazine. But this is the case. And the truck driver shoots across the median onto oncoming traffic, hits my client head on. She dies instantly. It's a horrible crash. I mean, she got hit by an 18-wheeler going, interstate speeds. And so the case started off horrible. And the truck driver, as soon as the wreck happens, claims, that I passed out at the wheel. It was a syncope event. He's claiming this is an act of God. The emergency medical doctrine, which is an unforeseen medical act, stops the duty that they owe. It's not their fault if they have a heart attack and didn't know it was coming. Well, that's how this happened. Well, what we were able to show in this case was he didn't have a syncope event, even though he had a doctor that diagnosed him with it. He fell asleep at the wheel, and we used industry materials to attack that. They followed when you shoot across the middle of the road, there are telltale signs of people who fall asleep at the wheel and wake up at the last second. He had done all those things, and we were able to find that through industry materials. This is a case involving a stolen vehicle. And And those cases can be difficult. There can be really difficult. What happened is, in this case, a company has a fleet vehicle. They go out to dinner. All the employees after work one day in a fleet vehicle that the company had given them. It's a commercial vehicle, but it was not an 18-wheeler. And so all the men are inside eating dinner. They leave the keys in the rear view mirror. They are in the sunshade. They kind of stick them up. A drunk driver inside leaves the restaurant. He's fumbling around different cars. He finds that car unlocked. He gets the keys, finds the keys under the rear view mirror or the sunshade, excuse me, and then steals the car and then hits my client head on. And this company had a manual on fleet vehicles. And it states here, keys must be removed from all unattended vehicles unless parked inside the facility. Well, they didn't do that. That was their own materials. But then there's the motor. This is a book, another book that you can purchase called the Motor Fleet Safety Supervision Principles and Practices Manual. And again, talks about locking vehicles and removing the keys from those. So we helped establish that that's what the company should have done in order to safely secure that vehicle from a third party. Now, there's some law that's changed on this since we handled this case in Georgia, which could impact this litigation. But here, these manuals are still very, very much industry standard for what companies should do. They have to secure their vehicles when they're not locked in a terminal facility or some fenced in location. This was a fun case. This was a garbage truck that was stopped in the roadway. Unfortunately, my client died, and there's nothing fun about that. As long as I do this, I'll never get used to the pain that is caused by the clients. But you can somehow begin to see where you can help these people by finding the lies that the defense are willing to spend to try to avoid liability. So what happened in this case, this is a garbage truck. My client, you can see in that center picture, is coming up behind the garbage truck. He's being blinded by the morning sunshine, and then he hits the rear of the garbage truck. And you can see the line there, the white line in the right-hand picture, that the garbage truck was halfway on the road and halfway off the road. And my client hit him there at the rear corner. So he was on the roadway at the time the wreck happens. This was interesting. So we asked in discovery, do you have any safety rules and policies that apply to your drivers of garbage trucks? Well, they give us the one on the left. And you can see that the very first rule starts with always wear the proper protective clothing. And there's nothing in that 22-point bullet that would have anything to do with this case. They've got, don't wear loose jewelry, in radio use, talk about seat belts, nothing that would have any application in this case. Well, I could have just stopped there and said, okay, well, they have no rules that are applicable, and I have to go come up with my own rules from some other source. But what I did do is I found where this company had been sued in the past for a different reason. This same garbage truck manufacturer had been sued in the past for a different reason. I found their corporate representative deposition. I found the exhibits to it, and one of the exhibits to that deposition was the safety rules and policies. And look, they changed it. Number 5 was in number 1 that I had, and the first 4 are absolutely applicable, including always pull off the road as far as possible. They violated that. Never stop on a hill or a curb. They violated that. Make sure oncoming traffic has a clear line of sight in which to see a stopped MDI truck. Do not pull up on. They violated all 4 of those. And so what do? They just removed them, printed it back out, and produced it to me. That hurt them a lot. This is nothing that hurt them. And this is really not industry materials, but it was fun. So I'll tell you about it. I watched the camera the police officer who investigated this crash was wearing a chest camera on his bulletproof vest. So I got a copy of it. I watched the whole thing, and the truck driver gives an explanation of what happened. The police officer says, hey, buddy, what happened? And the guy says, I was just coming up to this house. I had not really gotten there yet. I was in the process of getting all the way off the road. And but we, hadn't come to a full stop yet. And this guy just comes up and hits me from behind. Well, clearly he was making that argument so that he would comply with their standards, safety rules and policies that I had found, because I'd already found these by now, established that they had cheated in discovery, and that he needed to always pull off the road as far as possible. So he was trying to make the argument I was pulling off the road, and he established that in deposition, and he had told the police officer that too on the day of the wreck. And so I asked him in deposition. He says, yeah, I was pulling off the roadway. Well, I had the in-cab video, and I can't believe that they didn't watch this with their driver, but here's an in-cab video. Here he is going down the roadway. He's coming up to the house, and you can see through the glass there that the truck is clearly moving. And then let's fast forward it a little bit. All right, now he comes to complete stop, puts the car in park, or the truck in park, sits there, carries on a conversation. And remember, he told the police officer I was moving. Now he grabs a bag of peanuts. He eats these peanuts. He's clearly stopped in the roadway. Wow, and now he's hit. And we know the impact happened in the roadway. He was not moving off of the roadway. So he had not only perjured himself in deposition, but he had lied to the police in their interview. So I do get a chance to question him at the end of the deposition after I've established all this. And I ask him, do you understand how important it is to tell the police the truth? He says, correct. And this was a case that was pending in Alabama. You understand it's illegal to lie to the police who's investigating a crime or a crash. And he then says, correct. And then his lawyer steps in and asserts the Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination. The deposition stops, or it actually erupts into chaos and big arguments. But the deposition stops ultimately, and the case settled about a week later for the policy limits. These are some additional industry materials I didn't get a chance to look at specifically today, but these are other things I keep in my files that are equally useful, and things that I enjoy using in cases, and they all have great stuff in them. The Delmar's tractor trailer truck driving training. This is a book that's put out by a industry source just for truck driver training purposes. You got entry level driver training by J.J. Keller. J.J. Keller is a great resource. They got tons of materials that you can use. They got a great website you can shop. But this is a student manual with good resources that you can apply to your cases. Again, the National Safety Council has a defensive driving self-study course specific to driving, and this one actually can apply to cars and trucks. And then the American Trucking Association trucking industry guidelines, and so that's another source for determining preventability analysis. So those are some really good resources that we use in some of our cases. And thank you for going through these with me. Let's see here. All right. Well, that ends the presentation, and hopefully you all have enjoyed it. Let's see here. Stop screen sharing. There we go. So that is some of the times that I've used industry materials. There are more industry materials. I've actually got about 4 boxes of them that I use in addition to these books. And what I do is every time I handle a trucking case, I just, if it's not covered by a confidentiality agreement or protective order, and I pull the I pull the safety materials that I get from the trucking company. A lot of times what I do is I will find out from the trucking company, where do you get your safety materials? They'll say, well, we order them from Smith System. And then I'll send a subpoena to the Smith System and get the materials. And then I have them so they're not protected. I got them through subpoena. They're not covered by the protective order that the trucking company insists on. So I can use those in future cases. So that's one way I use those to kind of build my library that I use in these cases. So anyway, if anybody's got any questions, I'd love to answer them. It looks like, let's see, maybe there's, do you have any material to provide about your lecture? Absolutely. We do have this whole presentation will be provided to you. So, you know, and to the extent there's something in the presentation that you'd like, you know, if it's not a full book, I can send it to you. If it's a full book, I can tell you where to get it and order it. I mean, these books are not, I think they're mostly, you know, $20 or less to buy. They're not really all that expensive. And so that's a pretty, you know, accessible resource that you can have. But some of them I have are just, you know, scanned in documents that I have. I can send you the full document. What you have here is hopefully enough to tell you what it is that I was talking about, and shoot me an email. My email is chris.glover@beasleyallen.com, chris.glover@beasleyallen.com. Any other questions? No, thank you, Andrea. Hope this was helpful, everybody. All right. Well, let's see. Thank you, Margaret. Yeah. Let's give it just one more second if anybody has a question. Well, good deal. It doesn't look like we have any more questions. I am very, very thankful for everybody who attended today. We had a big group. We've got great folks who are friends of ours. Larry, there's one. Man, Larry, we go back. Thanks, man. So we good to have everybody on today. So thankful for the opportunity to share with you, and glad we get you down. I got you with 10 minutes to spare done. So have a great rest of your week. Take care.